Welcome once again to Along the Rio Grande. I'm George Torok. We have several guests in our studio today, and we're going to be talking about the Rio Vista site in the city of Socorro. We have Mr. Ray Caballero, who's doing some archives work for UTEP, and he'll tell us a little bit about some of those projects. We have the mayor of the city of Socorro, Mr. Raymond Rodriguez. Welcome. And we have a city administrator from Socorro, Delia Ponce. Welcome to Along the Rio Grande.
Good to see you, George.
Good to see you, George.
There's a lot of different projects that are going on, a lot of things that kind of tie into the Rio Vista complex in one way or another. We're going to talk about a number of those things today. Maybe we ought to start out by explaining where the site is and what exactly is there.
Great. The site is located within the city of Socorro city limits, right off of North Loop and Rio Vista. The center has been there for many years, though it was dormant for a couple of years during the Bracero years. We took action when we found out that the county commissioners were in the process of destroying the buildings, okay, and that was back in the 80s. The city of Socorro reincorporated our incorporated statuses in 1986. We took the initiative to go to Commissioner's Court and see if we could save, a very historical place within the city limits.
How big of an area are we talking about? How many buildings are we talking about?
We have a total of about 13 buildings in the area. Most of the buildings at that time were actually, they were just barely holding their own, They were getting ready to fall down, and we said, well, there's got to be a way to find some monies and find community work and people interested in renovation of those buildings. So we started by doing that. We got the community involved, and they were behind us. They wanted to see those buildings stay up and put for good use as far as for the community,
Sure. How big of an area does this complex cover?
That complex covers, I want to say, and just the buildings by themselves, I say they cover about 1.5 acres. Okay, but there's more surrounding property around the buildings that belong with the buildings themselves.
So this is a pretty large and a pretty significant area that's
large, yes.
Been kind of lost somewhere along the way, and there's a lot of interest now in trying to develop it for different purposes. Let's talk a little bit about the origins of the site. How did it begin? What originally was there?
Ray, can you help me out on that?
I'll be happy to. And really, I got the information from them, so you're overly modest about it. First, the city of Socorro should be commended for actually keeping us from destroying what is a tremendous asset now, and I hope will be a tremendous asset in the future. That started out as a poor farm. I first thought that was the name of a person, but poor farm means just that, farm for indigents, a place provided by state law. The counties could provide a home and a place for people to work, to support themselves. And of course, during the Depression, a lot more poor people, a lot more need, and the WPA, that is the Works Progress Administration, one of the Depression era programs that put people to work, was used to expand it from up to about 19 buildings, was my understanding.
So we're talking about it being a poor farm, 19-teens, 1920s, and then the Great Depression hits, and there's a need for more facilities, and that's when it's expanded.
I think early on, not only was it a home for indigent men, women, and children, but it may also have been the first county hospital could have been there too, I believe, okay? It has many, many histories in it. So it's a poor farm. There's a health facility there, I think we're maybe our first one. The WPA, someone told me that may be the largest existing WPA complex still around. It was a prisoner of war camp during World War II. Before that, WPA may have been a while where the Civilian Conservation Corps may have had some people there in the 30s and housing them so they could work here in the county. And then it was a prisoner of war camp. We know that there were Germans and Italians there held as prisoners, and there's some controversy as to whether there were Japanese there as well. And then after that, actually maybe during part of it during World War II and up to the mid-60s, it was a large center where they processed braceros, that is, temporary agricultural workers and railroad workers who were brought into the United States because of the tremendous shortage initially of manpower during the war. Later on, just because the agricultural industry became dependent on that sort of labor.
Come back to the Bracero program in just a minute here, but this is an integral part of the New Deal programs. It's a place that put people to work. Prisoners of war, what kinds of things would prisoners of war be doing in this area? Were they used in work as well?
Well, that's a good question. Did they do some work there? What did they do?
Well, actually, I really don't know if they were brought in to do some work. We've heard through historians within the community that they used to house there, some of them. Whether they were put out to work on the fields, I really don't know. I don't know if they just kept them there for a certain amount of time and then transferred them to someplace else. Sure.
They're probably used in agriculture to some extent. The area going up into New Mexico had a lot of that activity as well, so that may have been part of it.
One of the things we're trying to do, with the cooperation of Socorro, is to track down who was there. And so I want you to tell you that there's great interest at Fort Bliss, and I hope also with the German and NATO contingent that is here, that they will also be willing to cooperate, as they have in other locations. Sure. Bring some of the folks who are actually here as prisoners, maybe take oral histories, try to find the records, of the prisoner of war camp itself is difficult. There was a collection at Stanford. We asked a student to go look through it. Have not yet laid our hands on the actual records. We do have some old photographs and a few other things, but I think we're going to be able to obtain those records, and that's part of this wonderful work that the city of Socorro has allowed the rest of us to participate in, and I'm sure people in the community, as we speak, they will have things to add, and I hope they will.
Do we have information on people that worked in any of the WPA projects or CCC projects?
We've got some people in the community that still reside within the city that remember being there for a short time, or they know of somebody that was there. And they've got a lot of information, historical information, that they're willing to share with us in the community to promote the center.
I'll say now, in case you weren't going to prompt me sooner, I'll tell you that if someone out there, and I know there are people out there who do have information, photographs, letters, oral histories that they want to contribute, any other information they might have, they can certainly call me at 747-6834, or just ask for me at UTEP, or the city, 858-2915, the city of Socorro, Mary Rodriguez or Ms. Ponce.
Sure. Or they contact the program here as well, and we'd be glad to pass that information along.
As a matter of fact, some of the oral history that is being developed right now is through the efforts of UTEP and Community College.
Mention the Bracero program. Maybe we ought to explain what that is, because that's a real important part of the history of the site. What exactly was the Bracero program?
In 1943, in August, shortly after the United States really got heavy into the war after Pearl Harbor, 1942, and obviously you're shipping out, hundreds of thousands of men and recruiting, into the millions, and a lot of these are farm workers and whatnot, and you find yourself drained of your normal employment pool. Women, all of a sudden, have to go throw rivets at planes and do the work normally in those days that were reserved for men. And agricultural work, of course, critical to the nation. All of a sudden you find yourself without the hands to get the crops out of the ground and put them into the market. And so, desperate for labor, the United States turned to Mexico, as it has on other occasions, and asked Mexico, and they had their own crops to get out of the ground, so it was a matter of some controversy in Mexico, but asked them to contribute labor. Initially, I think the first year may have started out in the area of 9,000 or 10,000 workers. Eventually, we were sending into the 500,000 number of laborers into the country from Mexico. A lot of these workers, at one point or another, became residents and citizens of the United States, so there are a lot, and they have families. There are, many millions of people in the United States who relate to centers like Rio Vista, and in Mexico as well. I mean, that is part of of a binational history, and there is great interest in both countries over what happened in places like Rio Vista.
Now, this is something that was continued after the war for many years, and you had quite a steady flow of workers all the way into the 1960s, I understand.
I think it was finally terminated in 1964, and you still see to this day, every year, there are proposals to maybe do something. They might not call it the Bracero program, but do something similar. Not known by a lot of people, by the way, is that the railroads also brought in huge numbers of workers to work the railroads and their beds and so forth during their lines during the wartime.
Now, this site at Rio Vista, this was one of the main centers for processing people in the Bracero program?
In this area, certainly it was. How it ranks, I know it's one of the larger ones, but if you're asking me now whether it was the largest, I don't know.
Sure. But it certainly brought in thousands of people over the years and probably has a very personal connection to many of the people that live in the city of El Paso today.
And it does, and one of the good things that actually happened during that duration was that some of the people that came in from Mexico to help us in the Bracero Center, some of them had the opportunity to go ahead and stay in the United States and raise their families here. So, I mean, there's a lot of history behind all this. You know.
Let's talk about the site itself and how things got going to preserve it. You say by the late 1980s, the people had lost interest in it. They were thinking of even demolishing it at one point. Let's pick up the story from there. What happened?
Well, in '86, when the city of Socorro reincorporated their status as a township, okay, we started prioritizing some items within the city that we wanted to get done. During that process, we found out through Commissioner's Court that they were getting ready to demolish the buildings in the Rio Vista area. And the city took an interest right away because, you know, we know the history and we know the potential of the area that could bring to our city and the surrounding communities. So we made the effort to go to Commissioner's Court and actually we stopped them from doing something like that, and we actually went into a 50-year contractual with the Commissioner's Court so the city could go ahead and take over. In the meantime, the city would find ways to go ahead and find grants, monies, etc., to go ahead and start renovating the buildings. We took the initiative of starting with the first building back in 1992. A councilwoman by the name of Irene Montoya, which she's still in council right now, she took the initiative of making sure that we set aside some monies through the city budget to restore at least one of the buildings, and that building would be for the nutrition center for our senior citizens. We went out and we talked to our senior citizens throughout the community. We found out that they were ready to go ahead and help us with the actual sweat to go ahead and get this project started. So that's where it started, and we finally opened up the building in '93 for our seniors. We also continued on looking for additional monies through whatever sources we could to go ahead and renovate, you know, some of the other buildings. We were fortunate that we got some help from Texas A&M. In fact, they went ahead and they gave us some money to go ahead and do 2 additional buildings. Those 2 buildings are being utilized actually 110% because we've got so many nonprofit organizations and private organizations within the community that want to bring in services to our community.
Sure.
Those 3 buildings are maxed out, you know, and it's very interesting that we have the interest that we want to make sure that those buildings stay there and be working at the same time.
Sure. Delia, maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of these activities. What kinds of things have gone
Well,
on
actually,
out
like Mayor Rodriguez was telling you, we started off with a senior nutrition program, and since then it's just really escalated to all kinds of programs that we have now. Of course, we came into an agreement with Community College for a center director, and since we've had our center director there, she's been very instrumental in bringing in new types of activities. One of the activities that she's brought in is the Boys and Girls Club. You know, we have that particular activity going on. We also have folklorico dances there, or actually the training, you know, for folklorico dancing. We also have GED classes, and we also have citizenship classes there. And the demand is really there for other services to be brought in. We've been approached by other entities to see if perhaps they can provide a service. And because we don't have the funds right now to renovate the buildings, then of course we have them on a waiting list.
Right.
But hopefully, like Mayor Rodriguez was saying, we have gone out looking for funds in order to be able to renovate some of these buildings and bring
So the
in
hope
these
is that we
services.
can eventually start working building by building and then bring more agencies, more institutions
Exactly,
in.
more service providers. Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about how things kind of got restarted a year or so ago. What was that process like? Now all of a sudden there are people looking at the entire site and discussing ways to develop it. How did that get started?
And I think what happened is all along it's been a unpolished diamond. And when the city of Socorro took the initiative to first of all, to lease the property from the county, the 50-year lease, and when we renovated the community center and we started having community meetings there, then the word got out that there's this hidden treasure out there. And that's really how it started, by having community meetings and having other people come, and we would tour the place and have them look at the site. And the interest it created a domino effect after that.
And I understand that there's been some interest in different agencies looking at the lower valley overall and fitting the Rio Vista site into some long-term plan for development. I understand this led to a planning session, a series of meetings. How did that
Exactly.
take place?
And actually the community college played a big role in this planning session. In fact, they were the facilitators. We had a community group that came before mayor and council and wanted to see what the possibilities were of bringing in certain service providers, such as healthcare, and perhaps even a museum, and all kinds of activities that were brought before mayor and council. So since it is community-based, then what mayor and council decided to do was to go ahead and have a strategic planning session, which took place December the 3rd. And we had a variety of people that joined in that planning session. Not only did we have the local people contributing to the planning session, but we had expertise from just a well-rounded realm of
Who was
expertise.
represented there? What kinds of people came to that session?
We had people from UTEP, and we had people from Texas A&M, Community College. We had architects there. We had David Alvidrez.
School districts?
The Socorro School District. Fort Bliss was there. We had the Mission Trail Association. And of course, we had the City of Socorro representatives were there. We had the Clint School District was also there. The El Paso Museum was represented there. And so it was very well-rounded. We just had a really nice
A lot of
group.
interest from people.
Very much so.
And the idea was to kind of lay out some kind of plan for the future, what kinds of things could be done. What kinds of ideas came out of that planning session?
A lot more ideas than we thought of, okay? Because I was focusing only on what is it that I could do for my community, for the city of Socorro, which is fine. But when you get a group of community leaders and people from other areas, they'll come in with different ideas that they want to do for their communities, okay? And what happened out of that is that we had so many good ideas all in one list that we had to decide, okay, you know, what's step 1 through 10?
Priorities.
Yes,
set up some
priorities.
kind of-
And that's where the summit, it turned out real good because, you know, we talked about transportation, housing, medical, infrastructure, wastewater, water, a lot of things that I was thinking about my community, but I don't want to say that I was trying to ignore the communities around me. There's where they came in, you know, because they were having the same problems we were.
Right.
You know.
One of the main things that came up from that planning session that we also shared with everyone there was the possibility of building a museum. And there's a lot of history in Socorro, as we've mentioned. And there's some artifacts, in fact, that are currently in the archives at UTEP. And so we thought that maybe if we built our own museum, we most certainly could bring those back, to their original location, and then just add on, some other archives that are within the city.
What is the condition of a lot of these buildings? How many buildings do we think we can save and develop?
All of them can be saved, okay? The condition of the buildings are, well, not very good, because they were, for many years, they were not maintained by, the county or whoever was in charge of them. So, weather has done a lot of beating to them. When it rains, it goes right in. There's a lot of work to be done, but we found out that some of the woodwork that was done on those buildings is strong enough and safe enough to go ahead and work with it and keep them there, not destroy them, just keep them there.
So some of the architects that
Yes.
were involved said that these things can be
It's
saved?
amazing how those walls are set on just the ground without any concrete or cement. It's amazing, and they're still holding up. Like I say, the woodwork on the roofs, I mean, you can see right through, but the wood is still good to be used to, So it's amazing, the quality of work that was done back then.
And when people are looking at the complex and looking at all these buildings, talking about more community services, et cetera, the idea of a museum, and I understand that UTEP has developed quite an interest in immigration history, and this will tie into many of this. What kinds of, what's the significance of this site in terms of immigration history?
Well, as Mayor mentioned earlier, a lot of the workers who came across originally as temporary workers came back as permanent workers. They settled down here, and there are hundreds of thousands of them. I can't give you the number. And of course, their families. So there's a very large number of persons out there who want to come back and consider their roots, or they have some ties to this community through Rio Vista. It is a very important part of immigration. Agriculture, when you think of agriculture, you should think of Mexican immigration. It's connected with Mexican immigration today. It has always been connected with Mexican immigration. That's where we get our agricultural workers. And now, it used to just be here in the Southwest, now it's throughout the United States. So that's a rich part of our history.
And this is an area that's drawn attention more recently. Immigration history is more often focused on the Northeast and industrialization, but this is an area that has drawn a lot more scholarly attention. This area is almost kind of like an Ellis Island of the Southwest, in a sense?
Well, a lot of people refer to it that way. And if you think about it for a minute, El Paso really does have maybe the most significant place when it relates to Mexican immigration. It was, in fact, Ellis Island. If you looked at El Paso in 1920, the population of this town was greater than the combined population of all the other cities on the U.S. side, from Brownsville to San Isidro on the Pacific. And if you want to look at our regional cities, Albuquerque, Tucson, and Phoenix, if you took all their populations together, they would not have equaled El Paso's. This clearly was, with Juarez, they were the queen of all the cities around, the most dominant areas. Because the railroad lines T-boned here, the big east-west line through the United States, joining with the Mexican line coming up, this is what allows large numbers of people, families and individuals to move. All of a sudden, with the railroads coming here in the early 1880s, the population here mushroomed overnight. And
you could really see a migration pattern coming out of central Mexico, branching off east and west, going up into Albuquerque, Santa Fe.
absolutely. And this has always been the focal point. If you looked at all of these immigration records, all of them, when you're talking about Mexican immigration, historically, half the records are from right here.
Let's talk a little bit about what the next step is. What kinds of things are planned for the future? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think we need to continue in finding additional funding for continuing of the restoration of the buildings, but also not to forget that the buildings are utilized for the community, to see if we can provide more services to the community. That's our goal, to make sure that we have a Medicare office, a Social Security office, some type of a medical clinic, a Head Start for our students within the area. That's something we need to keep focused on, not to forget, what we're there for. We're there to service the community. And I feel that as long as we keep the interest going and we have the community behind us and we have the people from the surrounding areas willing to go ahead and work together, we should just keep going forward, and not look back and look at our history. We don't want to let that die either. We just want to keep going forward.
Is there one particular thing that needs to be done first? Is there a next step in developing the complex itself?
What I would like to see done first is a chunk of money coming down, so we can say, okay, we've got this going, we can get it going, that's our interest. But I think everything will fall in place, with given time, because of, again, I want to say the interest of the community, the interest of the people involved in these projects. They don't want to see it let it go down. They don't want to see it die at all.
And this will probably play an integral role in some of the expansion of immigration studies at UTEP.
There is an immigration history department that I'm not associated with, and was, in the past. I'm doing archives now. Yes, that's going to be a very important part, but really, I have to commend here the opportunity and the challenge that our good friends in Socorro, Ms. Ponce and Mayor Rodriguez, they've provided this tremendous opportunity, and already you have seen examples where it allows, in a very cooperative sort of climate, people from UTEP, Community College. I want to thank Gloria Estrada for being very instrumental in helping Socorro and all the rest of the people working with Socorro to put this conference together, to get these ideas together. But I was just thinking also the Community Foundation, Gary Williams there, Senator Shapley's office. The COG is now getting very interested in it. That's the local area government, all this combination. They see the enormous potential. I want to tell you that Socorro Independent School District, Union Pacific, the Railroad Foundation just gave them a nice grant, not to redo the whole thing, but certainly to get to keep going, and we're very grateful to them for that. But I want to tell you about something you probably didn't even know about. The other day I was informed, local writer, novelist, Benjamin Sainz, and photographer James Drake, anyone who goes out to that location finds it the way we all do. It's a magical thing. I mean, really, it's stepping back in time. It's an enormously inspiring experience. They found it the same way, on their own, okay? I told Ben about it, and he goes out there, took the photographer James. They had a show at the Whitney Museum over this site the other day in New York City.
It's terrific. There's a lot of interesting things that are going on, and maybe in a future program we can talk about them in a little bit more detail. But I really want to thank the three of you for coming here today and telling us all about these things. Ray, I hope you continue to work with some of those archival projects at UTEP. Mayor Rodriguez, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
Delia, thanks for telling us all about some of those community activities. And we want to thank all of you as well for joining us today on Along the Rio Grande, and we hope to see you again in our next program.